today's topic is how do we deal with the fear of making mistakes? Even though part of our brain goes, you got to get this right and we're going to rehearse it and we're going to give you a whole lot of worry and anxiety, it doesn't actually end up helping you. That is the essence behind all neurotic states. One part of us that desires something, has a dream for us, but the way it does it just creates a whole lot of hurt on the other side. The way that hurt is different for everyone. Some people it manifests in anxiety and worry. Well, really, if we look at that, what that is Welcome back to Expressions of Interest with your host, Tom Greer-Smith. All right, another solo episode. So, again, thanks for the suggestions and expressing what you guys are interested in. Today's topic, I've actually just chosen myself because I've been talking to a number of my athletes at the moment, and this has been coming up a fair bit. So I feel that it's not just important for my athletes to think about and to move through. I think it applies to everyone, right? But they're in the limelight about this topic in particular. They're the one that's under the microscope in the media, in front of millions of people doing this. But I think all of us definitely have different aspects of this in our life. So today's topic is how do we deal with the fear of making mistakes? And as I said, I think this resonates with a lot of people. And I'll probably maybe do a separate episode on fear itself, but I think the fear of making mistakes in particular, a lot of people can resonate with. And now with my athletes, they're literally paid to be excellent. In their minds, sometimes be perfect, right? And being excellent and very good is sometimes the fine line between winning a world championship and coming second. So they're hyper aware of making mistakes, and the smallest mistake, again, can be the difference between them achieving their dream and literally being the best in the world at what they do. And so that's a really big area that I'm working on with them, is going, how do I take on risks? How do I do my job with this background thought of, yeah, but what happens if I make a mistake? And then on top of that is they're doing this finite skill in front of millions of people on demand when it matters most to them. So let's acknowledge that that's pretty tough. But for all of us is when it matters most is key. And this starts getting into the understanding that I want to provide you with and some tools and actionables of how do we move through this. Is the key is it's important to you, right? It's like the analogy that I say is, did you get worried or nervous this morning making breakfast? Now, most people go, no, why not? Because it doesn't matter. It's not important to you. If you stuff up the eggs, you cook them again, right? It's fine. And so what we have to remember, or maybe understand, and to give the breadcrumbs to where we're going with this, is worry is fundamentally connected to our level of care. If we care about it, our brain is going to start creating some noise, or the psychological term would be metacognitions, right? And there's type 1 and type 2, but we won't go into that depth. But the reason why we have some of these cognitions, some of this noise, as we call it in the surfing world, is that you care. And everyone's got stuff that they care about. And so the brain goes, this shit's important. Here's some noise, right? So if we start off from that, let's go, how? Why do we even have this process? So let's go back to the evolutionary reason for fear or worry, right? Is that as we evolved, we have this front part of our brain, or the prefrontal cortex, which is sort of like the operating system of the brain. Now, really that is trying to organize things and make sense of things. Right? That's your CPU, your operating system. But if we go a bit further back and we go into the limbic system, now all mammals, or some people refer to it as the mammalian brain, right? All mammals have a limbic system, which means that this is where all our emotions are housed. So you can experience emotions, and different mammals, they experience emotions like us too, right? So in here we've got the amygdala, our threat detection hub, right? And its whole thing is to detect threats. Go, hey, is that something you should eat or shouldn't eat? Is that a saber-toothed tiger? It's just scanning the environment constantly. And that's literally how we survived, right? I mean, is that a threat? Yes, no. Okay, if it's a threat, then we need to upregulate. We need to upregulate because we either need to run away from the tiger, we need to fight the tiger, or there's this freeze response. And the freeze response, like, I don't know if you've seen the fainting goats. That's probably the best example that I can think of. These goats literally freeze and just fall over. Well, we'll go on that tangent real quick. But essentially what that is that there's this evolutionary bias to maybe the thing might not want to eat me if I look dead. And so I'm just going to freeze and act dead. And then hopefully the thing isn't going to be interested in predation anymore because it wants live prey. And to some extent, there's other reasons, but to some extent, that's also why there's that third freeze response in us as well, right? We're just going to freeze and hopefully the threat will move away and not influence me. So everyone, based on their genetics, based on their hereditary, their learned experiences, have a predisposition towards one of these different things, right? So if we think about that, it goes, the whole point of the brain is to detect the threat. So the amygdala fires off a signal and then it upregulates, which means you increase cortisol, you increase adrenaline, your parasympathetic nervous system is upregulated, right? So we've got the sympathetic and parasympathetic, right? Sorry, I meant your sympathetic nervous system is upregulated, which is different. The sympathetic sounds like it should be chilled and whatever, but your parasympathetic is your rest and digest. Your sympathetic nervous system is your fight-flight response, right? So you're having all this stuff that just upregulates, and then we go back to this prefrontal cortex. It's then trying to make sense of these emotions and these chemicals and everything like that. And there's literally a hijacking at times at a chemical level, get hijacked by these emotions and chemicals, and it really does cloud our judgment. So that's that biological reason of what's happening there, and makes it sometimes really difficult to do things in those moments. But if we look at what's actually happening there, it goes, hey, there's something that the brain wants you to do that's really important. And if it's not met, if you don't do it, then there's consequences. And so what the upregulation is, or the symptoms that you feel, there's some symptoms that you feel when there's a mistake about to happen, or you want something to happen, right? It goes, hey, this shit's serious. There's potential consequences. We're going to give you some chemicals to upregulate to make sure that you pay attention to this shit, because this is important. And so what ends up happening is you rehearse the performance, or you rehearse the desired task via anxiety, right? And so now you actually focus on the anxiety, and you just want to get rid of the anxiety rather than the task. And that's why we get a little bit out of sorts, because we're actually not focusing on the thing that's important. So if we then take a second to step back and we go, why do I care about this in the first place? So what did I actually want to happen? I wanted to, I take the example of surfing, right? I wanted to complete the turn. Why is it important? Well, one, if I complete the turn, then that's, the judges really reward that, and I get a couple extra points for that. But it's completing the the task, right? I want to complete the turn, right? So in the desire to do something that, as we said before, is important, there's some inkling of proficiency that you've done it before, right? For you to desire and want something, it means you've experienced it somewhere, somehow. Otherwise, you wouldn't know you wanted it, right? So that's probably the first thing to think about is you must have a hint of what it feels like. So if you just stop for a second and go, okay, the thing that I'm fearful of making a mistake on, when did I nail it? When did I do it really well? I must have some hint of doing it well, right? And let's take a second to think about that and access that, right? And that's probably the first practice thing that I would consider doing is like, let's access what it felt like to nail it and do it well. And let's allow you to be awesome by just sitting here and just listening to it. Why do you need to be awesome by doing that specific task, right? Allow you to be awesome by just sitting here and being who you are. Because if it's that damn good, let's not wait. Let's not wait for a outcome of a task or an action that you don't have full control over. Let's proactively access it because it's that damn good. Let's do it right here and right now. So take a second to do that. And then if we take that moving forward, it goes, if we really look at why we're wanting to do that and what we're doing, right, is it was important to you. That doing that thing was important to you. Why was it important? What's the update on that now? So what ends up happening is somehow, some way, at some point in time, you learned the consequences of not doing that thing. And that was probably quite painful. And if you didn't learn it personally, you learned it vicariously through someone else. You saw them stuff it up and your brain went, no, that looked terrible. I don't want that to happen, right? So then your brain creates defense mechanisms. Freud talks about this, right? There's a bunch of them. We don't need to go into it, but it creates a defense mechanism because that was really painful. You learned how much that sucked of getting it wrong. And your brain goes, no, let's never have that happen again. So in its attempt to prevent you from experiencing that painful thing, it actually creates a whole lot of distress within you, right? It goes, hey, you need to be good. You need to be amazing. You need to get this right. You can't be wrong. Now, that has a benevolent intent, right? Its intent is good. It wants you to be great. But the way it does that, think about actually if you slow that down and how does that actually make you feel? Like if you even listen to that, right? If you go, hey, you need to be amazing. You need to be great. You can't make a mistake. You can't stuff this up. You need to be perfect. Do it right. There's no mistakes allowed. If you slow that down and actually start witnessing the emotions that pop up right now, how does that make you feel? Because in its intent to get you to be amazing, it creates a whole lot of distraught, a whole lot of hurt. So there's a part of you that is hurt and the part of you is the hurter, right? Or the victim and the victim maker, right? And that is the essence behind all neurotic states. There's one part of us that desires something, has a dream for us, but the way it does it just creates a whole lot of hurt on the other side. The way that hurt is different for everyone. Some people it manifests in anxiety and worry. Well, really, if we look at that, what that is what I call your brain is just running scenarios. Hey, this shit's important. You got to get it right. You got to do it well. Let's run some scenarios. Let's upregulate. Let's give you all this cortisol. Let's give you all this adrenaline. Let's sit there at night and think about all the possible scenarios that could go wrong so then you nail it tomorrow. But what's the problem with running scenarios all night long? How does that actually make you feel, right? So what ends up happening is there's this other part of you that's just left there feeling overwhelmed and feel like shit because you've got no choice, right? So we got one part that wants to get it right and another part that just goes, yeah, but you just make me feel hurt and overwhelmed, right? And what we got to think about is that a sustainable relationship? Like, in what world do you actually put up with that in your everyday life? Like, for the athlete example, in what world would you allow your coach to say to you, hey, you have no choice but to get this right. You have to nail this. You cannot make a mistake. You have to get this right. Okay, coach, but now I just feel like I've got too much pressure and expectation. And at some point, you probably would step up and draw a line in the sand and say no. Because not only does that just make us feel pressure, anxiety, and like shit, it also doesn't actually help with performance. Even though part of our brain goes, you got to get this right, and we're going to rehearse it, and we're going to give you a whole lot of worry and anxiety, but it doesn't actually end up helping you. But it probably got you to here, right? We don't do negative shit for no reason. That's important to remember. It probably got you to here. It got you to this point in time, and you were critical on yourself and doing different things, and it was helpful in the sense that in that hypercritical state, you probably grew your competence. But what's the update with that now? What's the update when that really is a whole lot of contextual pressure, and now you're on the world stage, or now you've got the promotion in your job and there's more contextual pressure, but now you've also got this internal pressure. Now you've got there's too much. Now there's overwhelm. You've got internal pressure plus contextual pressure, and that doesn't equal performance. That's not a good equation, right? So if we think about that, first we've got to go, well, let's draw a line in the sand and really ask ourselves, are we up for being in an abusive relationship with yourself? Because let's call it what it is. It is abusive. You would not put up with any of your friends, any of your loved ones or your coaches talking to you like that. It is abusive. So call it for what it is and ask yourself, do you want to be about that anymore? And is that sustainable? Does it have your best thoughts in mind? And is it getting the best results? Clearly not. A bunch of symptoms. If you were fine with being anxious, you'd be running around like a mad hatter going, I'm anxious, I'm anxious, I'm anxious. But there's a but in there, right? And the but is the important bit. I'm anxious, but. Well, that leads me to some breadcrumbs and going, yeah, but you got to dream for something different. So let's have a look at that. And everyone is specific and different. So if we look at how we do that, we naturally do that with kids. If you got 5-year-old Johnny, he's trying to ride a bike and he's stuffing it up and he's not doing well and he's making mistakes, what do you naturally say to the kid? You naturally go to him. There might be some words of encouragement. You might say, you can do it, Johnny. I believe in you. But then most people go to this task-specific feedback. We go, hey, Johnny, 2 hands on the handlebars. Pedal a little bit faster, right? We don't focus on the person so much. We don't focus on the emotions. We focus on task-specific actions to help Johnny achieve what he wants to do. But we don't do that too often with ourselves, right? We go more into the personal, into the emotional. You're not good enough. You stuffed this up again. Why can't you get anything right? Those absolute statements are so ridiculous because you would never say that to your coworker going in there and going, damn it, Janice, why did you stuff up the paperwork? You're useless. You shouldn't be doing bookkeeping anymore. You're terrible. You'd never do that to a coworker. I hope you wouldn't do it to your loved ones either. You'd certainly never do it to a kid. What's going to happen to the kid? The kid's going to start crying. He's going to be overwhelmed. Well, there's a part of you that's still that little kid that just wants to be supported, that just wants to be encouraged. Just because you're an adult now doesn't mean that that part of you that just simply wants someone to say that it's okay and that you're good enough and that you can do it, that will never go away. So please, 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 I encourage you, don't forget about him. Don't forget about her. She needs your support, right? And so that's the way that we can think about that is go, one, you're probably pretty good at being critical. So let's get more critical about being too critical in yourself. Right? So let's draw a line in the sand of that inner critic and go, hey, I'm going to get quite critical on this just abusive, tirading self. It's not helpful, right? It's not helpful at all. Because some people then go, well, okay, I just will stop caring. This is what you see in tennis. They just start tanking and they stop caring, right? Well, that's just the brain's way of going, there's too much anxiety and worry. What's the root cause of that? It's care. Okay, if I stop caring, then I'm just going to get rid of this anxiety and worry right now. Okay, great. But then what happens? You stop caring, so you stop engaging. You're less motivated. And we know what happens when people are less motivated and engaged. They perform less. Great. That didn't work out too well, but it did decrease the in-the-moment worry and anxiety. So again, it had a defensive, benevolent intent, but the end result is, okay, poor performance. So what I like to think about is going, it's not about caring less. It's about caring more. We need to update what care looks like, because at the moment, care has only got one person in mind. You're only caring about the outcome. You're only caring about the performance, right? But we need to care about that little grom inside of you that just wants to be supported and encouraged, right? So we need to update what care looks like. Let's get far more sophisticated and care better. Care for that person in you that just wants to be told that you're good enough and that you can do it, right? So how we care better is like any relationship. Define what we want to be about. What relationship do you want to have with your performance self? I want to be kind to myself. I want to be compassionate. I want to be supportive. And if you don't know how to do it, find someone who does it in your life, because again, you don't desire something that you haven't experienced. Someone in your life does it. So that's probably the second activity to think about, is going, who in my life does this care and support thing well? Could be a coach, could be a loved one, could be a parent. You desire it more than anything else. It's so good when they do it. Again, let's get proactive and let's not wait. If it's that good, let's do it right now. And if someone does it on top, it's a bloody bonus, right? So how do they care for you? And let's practice the way they do it and do it for us, right? Third and final thing is feedback needs to be task specific. We cannot fall into the trap of focusing on emotions in the person. It's outdated. It's primitive. It's not sophisticated. We're better than that. You're better than that, right? And you don't do it in any other area in your life. You don't do it to the poor coworker. You don't do it to your partner. Well, I hope you don't do it to your partner. But the stronger emotions they are, the harder it is to be really rational and objective like this. But the point is, focus on the task. But let's do it to yourself. So when you're in the moment and the stuff starts building up, you go, hey, no, let's be critical on this inner critic. I'm not up for that anymore. What do I want to be about? How do people care for me? Cool. That's what I want to do. Feel that, access that. And then go, okay, what would I tell? And if we want to give an analogy to task-specific actions, what would you tell a Grom? What would you tell a 5-year-old kid? Or what would you tell a kid doing that thing right now? What would you naturally say to them? Come on, mate. You can do this. Trained hard. You know what to do. You now need to do X, Y, Z. Give them task-specific actions as feedback to be better able to do the thing, right? And that's how you move through the fear of making mistakes. Now, everyone is very specific in their different ways of doing it, but that's, in a nutshell, one of maybe a process, one intervention that I might do with a surfer and athlete. But think about that and try that yourself at home. Again, hit me up if you've got any questions, any feedback on that. DM me at EOI_pod. And I'll be putting up different polls. Please express what you're interested in, because whatever you're interested in, I'll hope if there's enough people interested in it, I'll do an episode on it. Because again, my mission is to provide you guys with engaging, accessible, and actionable psych information that we can demystify this whole world at psych, and then I can provide you free resources so you can thrive in your life. So like, subscribe, do all that garbage, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.